So hello Subaru fans. Today we're going to talk about what you need to do to get your Subaru and take it to the next level. Now if you've been a MotoIQ fan and following the build of our GD STI for the past several years, we took it from a stock STI to a pretty solidly built car. What we did is the engine has all the bolt-ons all the way up to like a precision upgraded standard position turbo. It was putting out 400 horsepower to the wheels, which is a lot for a stock bottom end EJ, if you know your EJs very well. And we figured that at this power level, the engine was going on borrowed time. And sure enough, after 3 years, the engine blew up. Well, it didn't really blow up, but it broke a ringland and started to smoke really bad. Typical Subaru thing, right? Now we're going to fix the car, add all the peripherals to handle more power and be able to make it so we can take the engine to the next level if we desire. Now, this is kind of like an overview also for the rest of you. I know a lot of you are interested in Subarus, and if you're taking your Subaru to a higher power level, it's more than just throwing the motor in. So we're going to explain all that, but let's start with the engine. This engine is an IAG 900. Now it's a kind of a collaboration between IAG and us. It's their motor, their secret sauce, but we did all of the cryo treating and WPC treating of everything. And we talked to them about cam specs and things like that, but this is everything they do. IAG is a really competent builder of Subarus. They do just about all the stuff that we do in our own Subaru builds. The IAG 900 is a pretty cool block that's a basis for a lot of upgrades. Now it can take up to 900 horsepower, and now that's crank horsepower, not wheel horsepower. And to do that, basically you start with brand new Subaru cases. You bore the cases so you could have 14 millimeter studs. This helps keep the gasket from lifting. They also do a closed deck conversion, and they bore the block half a millimeter over with all the fixturing that they have. Now, if you've seen our prior videos, having the proper fixturing for Subaru machining is super critical because the cases distort a lot with the tightening of the bolts. So you need a bottom plate and a top torque plate to distort the case in the same way. In addition, it has their stage 4 CNC heads. They're fully CNC ported, and they use SuperTech valves in our case, stainless nitride on the intake and Inconel on the exhaust. Everything's been WPC treated to make it all kosher, and everything's been cryo treated as well. For camshaft, we're using GSC stage 2. This is a kind of a mild cam, maybe one step up from a really mild cam, but nothing too crazy. This is going to be like a track day and a street-driven car, so we don't want a really high power band. On the bottom end, we're using a stock Subaru crank. It's the later crank. I think it's kind of escapes me, but I think 2007 they went to a nitrided crank, so it's a later crank. It's been all deburred, balanced. All the oiling holes have been chamfered, and it's been cryo treated and WPC treated. We're using Callis rods that are 2 millimeters longer than stock with ARP 625 bolts. Now this is a primo rod bolt. It can take a lot of abuse. And we're using IAG's own piston. It's a forged piston, low silicon. The piston has a lot of cool features like buttresses to the pin, raised up pin for the longer rod. It's nickel plated, which is interesting. Instead of a coating, it has like a slippery nickel. This helps the ring groove life and the skirt, and it makes it all slippery. So it's a kind of a unique piston to IAG. It's been cryo treated, and it's had some WPC in the pin boss and the ring grooves. but the skirts are nickel, so we left those alone. Overall, this is a really solid engine. It's going to take all of our anticipated power. We kind of feel like the engine's going to be about 450 horsepower with the turbo that we have. It's a precision ball bearing drop-in replacement turbo, so it's not huge. But you know, if we decide to go to a rotated mount bigger turbo later, we know this engine will handle it. So we're starting with a really solid motor, and we're going to move on to the peripherals. So getting a successful build together is more than just dropping an engine in the car. In the case of our GD, it's a 17-year-old car, and we're going to make sure that once we put the motor in, we're not going to have any problems even when we drive on the track. So the first thing is cooling, and that's the coolant and the oil. A lot of people ignore it, but it's essential for a car that's making more than twice as much horsepower as the stock car. That's all extra heat. That heat has to go somewhere. The car already has a CSF heavy-duty high-capacity radiator, so that takes care of the coolant. It also has a Greddy big oil cooler, so that helps with the oil temperature. There's one other thing we're going to do on the engine. GAT makes a kit that helps the coolant circulation with the cylinder number 4. Now in the Subaru engine, cylinder number 4 gets hotter than the other ones. That leads to detonation and damage of the ringlands and stuff in that one cylinder before the rest of the engine. So this is a kit that takes some of the coolant from the heater system and bypasses it. It gives extra flow to cylinder number 4. It's easy to install, especially with the engine out of the car, and it's something every EJ should do, especially if you drive it on the track. We also have to make sure that the engine's oiled correctly. Subaru engines, the pan doesn't have much capacity. There's no real baffling in there. It's a boxer engine, so oil tends to slosh down and get up into where the cylinders are and not drain into the pan well. So Subarus tend to have a lot of oiling problems. They spin a lot of bearings. They also break the oil pump pickup really easily. Now we went over this in the whole video on its own, but IAG makes an excellent pan, excellent heavy-duty pickup, and a windage tray to help keep the oil in the pan and away from the crank and all that, and to make sure your engine has a good solid supply of oil. That is a pretty essential thing, especially on a track-driven car. Also, we have a IAG high-volume, high-pressure oil pump. Now this oil pump is, the passages have been CNC ported for more flow. It's the 11mm gear, but this 11mm pump flows more than the Subaru 12mm pump. All the clearances and the backside clearances have been all set and blueprinted, so you don't have excessive leakage, and the bypass valve has been shimmed for more pressure. In addition, the bypass valve and the gear rotors in here have been REM finished. That helps with fatigue strength and reduces friction. It's a nice piece. I think every modified Subaru should have it. The next thing is you have to fuel the car properly. Now the stock fuel system on the STI can barely handle the stock engine. So for our mild bolt-ons, we did have bigger injectors and a bigger pump, but being flex fuel, it wasn't enough. We were maxed out at our power level, and our airflow meter was maxed out. So since we're taking it to the next level, we had to upgrade the fuel system. You saw some of this in a prior video. We're putting this radium hanger and Walboro big pump. This has way more capacity than what we have in there now, which is just a drop-in pump. This helps deal with fuel slosh and also helps get the fuel out of the other side of the saddle tank better. We did a whole video, so I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here, We're going to put the links to all these parts that we already talked about in the description. So we have a whole nother set of videos that you can watch with a lot of detail. The Subaru wiring for the fuel system is really inadequate. It can't handle anything more than a mild drop-in pump. So when you start to go to dual pumps or a big single pump like this Walboro, you start to have problems with the wiring getting hot, frying, the wires not being able to provide 13.5 volts to the pump, so the pump doesn't put out like what it should. Subarus are worse in this respect than other cars, so what we were planning to do was to just add a relay and disconnect all the stock stuff and wire the pump straight to the battery. But then I found out that iWire has a better solution for this. iWire has a drop-in kit to rewire your fuel system directly to the battery with a nice heavy gauge cable. And the best thing is iWire has a fuel pump speed controller, so you can maintain your OEM function where the ECU controls the pump speed. Now, what we're going to do is just to wire the pump so it's going full blast all the time. But what that does is it causes the regulator to work a lot, and the fuel in the tank can get hotter, which could be an issue on a really hot day if you're almost out of gas. The fuel could get real hot, possibly vapor lock. So the solution to keep the OEM fuel speed control with a big pump is a great thing. It's a lot more sanitary. Don't have to do any figuring out. So it's a total drop-in. We're really glad that we discovered this, and some of it was through the help of some of our YouTube viewers that told us about it. Since our airflow meter is topped out, we're switching from mass airflow sensing to speed density. So we have map sensor wiring, intake air temp. This is all going to help go to speed density, so we're not going to have to worry about the MAF topping out, and we'll have better drivability. We're going to bigger 1300cc injector dynamics injectors. This is going to give us enough capacity for our additional horsepower. Our old 1000cc injectors are completely maxed out. Other things that we have to handle additional power, X-clutch, twin disc clutch. Now this is a twin disc clutch that can hold a lot of power with a light flywheel. We went into a lot of detail. We did a whole video on the inner workings of this clutch. It's really trick. Check out that video. Link is in the description. Four-wheel drive cars, if you're launching and even coming out of corners hard, since it's four-wheel drive, it puts a lot of torque and movement on the drivetrain. So the engine and transmission can move around a lot, and that can cause problems with your shift linkage. It can cause wheel hop issues, and it puts a lot of stress on your drivetrain. So we got an IAG motor mount kit. So it's a transmission mount, motor mounts, and a pitch stop mount. It all has harder durometer urethane of a smaller diameter that limits the movement. We're running the soft bushings for street application. I think it's 80 durometer. I could be wrong. But IAG also makes inserts so you could switch up your bushings if you want. So let's say you're going to go full race. I think they make some aluminum bushings that go in here. And they also make a harder polyurethane bushing. So you have 3 different choices of hardness. We're using the softest ones because we're old and grumpy. These do increase your NVH some, but I'd rather have the drivetrain held in there solidly and not have wheel hop and that jerking stuff that can actually break things, especially if you're trying to launch your car. The stock Subaru has TGV valves in the lower manifold, and they're like a butterfly that's probably in there for emissions or something. It does nothing for power or power band, and it's just a failure point, and it also inhibits flow. So IAG makes these cool billet things that totally get rid of the TGV valves. IAG also makes an excellent air oil separator. Subarus puke a lot of oil out of the breathers, and you can actually puke a couple quarts out during a track session sometimes, and that is not good for your motor. IAG could separate that from your breather gas and return it to the crankcase. We have a Cobb downpipe construction. The part that goes on the turbo is investment cast with a really nice flange, so you're not going to get any exhaust leak. The other flange is investment cast, really high quality, stainless TIG welded with a high flow cat. Nice piece. You know, when you drive on the track, all this stuff sees a lot of RPM, so why ruin the track day because your 17-year-old alternator goes out. We're also replacing every belt and every idler and tensioner for the belt because those bearings could go out, especially for track use. And on the Subaru, you probably all know it, but it has a crap load of OEM rubber hoses going everywhere. This is just a handful of them. But while the engine's out of the car, we're going to replace every single one of these 17-year-old hoses with brand new OEM parts. So you don't have to worry about some obscure little heater hose or some throttle body water hose cracking and ruining your day. So everything's going to be all fresh. And you know, if you have a car that's older, it's probably good to invest in a little bit of this stuff. It doesn't cost that much, and it's all easy to get to while the engine's out of the car, and it's a bitch with the engine in the car. So why not, right? This is like what you should do if you have an older high mileage car and you're building the motor and everything's out. So you gotta make sure cooling and lubrication and fueling and old parts that can wreck your day are all replaced while you're in there. That's kind of a lot of money even up front, but you know, if you have everything new, it would suck to have some little leak or some lack of cooling or some lack of fuel wreck your day and cause something that could damage your brand new motor. For a nice extra touch, we're going to be running this IAG skid plate. Being an older car, all the undercar plastics are all rotten, cracked, or falling off. So this thing is going to replace all the panels under the nose. It's made out of 6061 aluminum, about 3/16 thick. It not only protects your engine and the underneath of the car, but it also helps clean up aerodynamics. It also helps chassis stiffness too, so you can't lose. It comes down easy with just a few bolts, so it doesn't screw up the ease of maintenance for the car. I think it's a win-win. So, nice extra touch. So since this is an old project car, we've done a lot of stuff. So there's a ton of articles, a ton of videos on things we've done. The links will be in the description. There's probably a few days of reading. So if you're a Subaru buff, it's like a book of how to modify your Subaru. So I really recommend that you check out the links and read and see everything we've done so far. And if you want us to do your Subaru or any other car for that matter, go to MotoIQ, click Garage Services, and tell us what you want. Write a kind of intelligent description and we'll get back to you. So until next time, I guess there's next time.